Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. Well, he's coming back. Not who you think exactly, but Brian Cashman. Yankees bringing back GM Brian Cashman for another 4 years at least. Maybe to the chagrin of some Yankee fans, but nevertheless, he will be back. He kind of figured it was going to happen. So it's still no news on the big man, but we will get into the Cashman deal, as well as some really big names have come off the free agency board, really leaving Judge as the number one, but some big names coming off, and has some ramifications, not only locally, but with the Yankees, and we'll get into all that, how it works, as well as some news with one of the former Yankee captains, Don Mattingly, both on and off the field. So got a lot of stuff to get into. We'll get right into it, but to make sure, if you haven't done it already, there is a audio podcast version of the show with more content than you can see here or anywhere else, so make sure you subscribe. So I'm sure many fans did not want Brian Cashman back. This is why the Yankees got a limit against the Houston Astros, getting swept there, and then really not even looking competitive in 3 of the 4 games there. But you kind of knew he was going to be back. Obviously, you might recall he did the end of the season press conference with Aaron Boone then, and technically he did that conference, with his contract expired, so he's kind of still representing the Yankees. So you just kind of figured it was a handshake agreement that he was going to come back. So I know some people, want a different direction, want him to get canned, but just the fact that happened, you just didn't see that was going to be the case. And, Hal kind of backed him up as well as he did last year when the team was struggling offensively. So you could see the relationship was there. So you didn't see that there was going to be any way that, Cashman was not going to come back unless he really wanted to. So looks like it's going to be a 4-year deal. Now, they haven't really disclosed the details quite yet of, how much money and all that, but it's going to at least be 4 years. And Cashman already is the longest serving Yankee GM in team history. Again, he's giving the GM and, owner, vice president of operations. So still going to be pretty much doing what he's doing now, controlling all the scouting, all that stuff. So that's all the same. Now he is 55 years old, and he's kind of been here for quite a while. So I personally, again, I kind of said he would come back if you watch previous episodes, but I feel like this is probably going to be his last contract. This for the fact he's 55 years old, and who knows how long he wants to keep doing this. And now maybe if he gets 2 or 3 championships during these 2 or 4 years, then maybe that energizes him to want to come back and do more. But I feel this is kind of the last go around, and a little surprised that it's 4 years. That's kind of big there. So I figured it'd be maybe a 2 or 3 year deal. It would never be a 1 year deal because you don't want someone as a lame duck. So I'm a little surprised about the length of the 4 years there, but nevertheless, not surprised back that he's back and it's official. And it's kind of the first domino, and it's probably the reason why they, on paper, or at least officially, haven't made an offer, at least that we know it's real with Judge. I mean, we hear all these sorts of rumors. You hear anywhere from $288 million to anywhere from $337 million. It could be 8 to 9 years in there. Just the fact that he's age 30, he's going to be 31 when the season starts. You're probably looking more at a 8-year deal, but nevertheless, he's going to be the highest paid position player in baseball history once this does go down. But again, I think officially you have to have the GM locked in, which the Yankees do now. Now he could officially really start getting serious with the Judge talk. So you'll probably start to see that start really escalating now and probably come to an end sooner rather than later. Now currently, the Yankees, Brian Cashman went to the winter meetings. Usually that's when you start kicking the tires on the trade. So, of course, there were some big free agency signings. We'll get into all that. But in terms of the winter meetings, those are mostly for trades. But usually you're laying the groundwork. You don't really have trades during that week. It's just sort of put feelers out there and what could be possible, who's available and what that. And then kind of when everyone gets back home that's when you start seeing the trades happen. So even though you have the winter meetings, it's usually after the winter meetings when you see those trades. And so again, that's probably where you might see some deals going down where, for example, one of the names out there for Pittsburgh making available is Brian Reynolds, who they're making available, and supposedly the Yankees might be kicking the tires on him. He would be a good upgrade. Again, it's good that you re-signed Rizzo, and it's good, hopefully, it's not official yet, but if they bring back Judge, but of course, the Yankees still need to do more because this is still at the end of the day a team that got swept in the second round, so they still got to be better than that team, so they're going to have to add some players, so adding someone like a Reynolds would be great. They're also supposedly, kicking the tires on Carlos Rendon, getting the lefty from San Francisco there. That'd be a great addition, just to have a lefty up there, and you have him, you'd be very top heavy with Cole, Rendon, and Severino, 1, 2, 3. That's, pretty darn good there. And then it kind of takes the pressure off some guys at the bottom there, whether it's like a Frankie Montas type like that. Because of course he's still in the mix there for the Yankees in that rotation. And as for Reynolds, he's only been in the league for 4 years, but he's signed through 2023. So if you do bring him aboard, it's just going to be a kind of a 1 year rental. But pretty nifty player. Was an all-star in 2021. Only 27 years old. Hit 262, had 27 home runs last year, as well as 62 RBIs. Only 7 stolen bases, not a speedster, but What is it? I think his strong points is that he's a switch hitter, which is great, just for flexibility, and he does have the ability to play all fields for the Yankees. So no matter how what happens next year, he could play center, he could play left, he could play right. So it just has that flexibility there. And again, a pretty good player there, and would be a good replacement. Just the fact that obviously Benintendi walked away from free agency, and I don't think the Yankees are bringing him back. They might kick the tires on him, but like I said before, with the wrist injury, I don't want, not that I don't want him back, but I think that's risky. I'd rather have someone like Reynolds you could put there instead. That would be a good way to recoup there, nevertheless, for the Yankees. And for Cashman, of course, I just think, as I mentioned, again, if you make sure you follow the podcast, previously I just mentioned that I think his biggest aim is to bring in some arms here, because you saw what happened in the playoffs. The Yankees kind of fell short there in the bullpen department, and it didn't really burn them too much, but they were still asking a lot of the likes of Wandy Peralta, Loizaga, and Clay Holmes, and it's not exactly Stanton, Nelson Rivera back in the day. So I think whatever Cashman could do, which he has a pretty good job, he does good job doing, is trying to find talent from other teams and see if he can just bring in some arms there, similar to Houston did. I mean, they brought a lot of arms from other teams there, and they all just came together. So the Yankees got to do something similar, because the Yankees were pretty short there. They ended up burning too much. You had to use Clark Schmidt in some spots where you don't want him to in the playoffs, but Cashman thing is going to have to be make him, a move like Rendon would be great. You can add him. Make a trade like Reynolds would be great, and then again, just bring in a whole bunch of arms. Just have auditioning arms after arms after arms in spring training there, and see if the Yankees have a more deeper bullpen. Because again, once Michael King went down and some other pieces went down, luckily didn't cost the Yankees, but they were definitely shorthanded when it came to the playoff time. So again, bullpen arms should be a priority for Cashman during these winter meetings. Now, other than Aaron Judge, probably the second biggest name available in the free agency market, well, kind of opted out, so he made himself free agency, was Jacob deGrom of the Mets. He ends up signing a big deal with the Texas Rangers for 5 years for $185 million, so he's making now $37 million per year. Now he's 34 years old. And for the Mets, I really don't blame him too much. As we know, when he's on, deGrom is probably hands down the best, pitcher in baseball. There's not even arguing. But as you know, and I'm sure as Mets fans know, he's hurt all the time. And even last season, majority of the season, even though the Mets had a great season, they won like 102, 103 games. They did a lot of that without deGrom, even without Scherzer as well. So I don't think it's a death blow for them. But obviously, you have a great pitcher come up through your system like that. You would like to keep him for a Met as long as possible, and maybe retire his number in the whole 9 yards. But nevertheless, he opted out, goes to Texas, and it's kind of like where's his priorities at a little bit. I'm in Texas, was a terrible team last year. They're out in the West Division, which is tough because they have to deal with the Houston Astros, and plus now you got the Seattle Mariners on the rise as well. And Texas is not even close to either of those two teams. Even by adding deGrom, yes, of course, it makes them better, but it's still not a contender for a couple of years there. So it just seems like a situation where it was just straight up about money. Now, you're hearing all sorts of rumors here that, obviously it's Stephen Cohen, he's got the big bucks, and for him to let someone walk away, all that. Supposedly the Mets offered him 3 years, but Texas came back with 5, and supposedly, Cohen might have matched that or done better, but supposedly deGrom was even interested in hearing Cohen's counter offer that says, hey, 5 years, great, I'm out of here, I'm gone. So it seems like maybe he just didn't want to be here, and you have all this stuff. Of course, you have the state tax. You have state tax in New York. You don't have that in Texas. So, technically he's getting more out of his money by playing for Texas in that way. And, of course, you just don't have the scrutiny. Now, you never really felt that, like, deGrom was ever scrutinized here in New York. I mean, other players have been bashed way more than deGrom. I don't even think you heard a whisper about deGrom. Of course, fans complain because he's hurt all the time, and all that. But no one really got tough on him, so I can't see it's that. I just think Mike Moore just wanted to get out of New York and just go somewhere else, and wasn't really too interested to stay with the Mets long term. So obviously he's a New York Met. Never thought the Yankees would even kick the tires in that one, and I don't even think they did. But of course, one thing led to another, and of course another big name went out there right after this. Of course, as a result, was Justin Verlander signing with those Mets for a 2-year deal worth $86 million, so it's just insane. I mean, you got Scherzer making like $43 million a year. Now you got like Verlander making pretty much the same thing, like $44 million. Now there is an option for a third year for $35 million that kicks in if the team wants to bring him back. And Verlander, of course, a couple of years older than deGrom. deGrom 34, so not exactly a spring chicken himself. But one of the silver linings of deGrom being hurt all the time, he really hasn't thrown a ton of innings, but still, he's starting to get into his mid-30s. Verlander, of course, is just about there at 40, 39 years old. So for just 2 years there, for the Mets, it's not really a terrible deal for them. Verlander, had a pretty good season last year. So won a championship with the Astros there, multiple time champion, a lot of experience, and again, you're not stuck with the guy for a long period of time there. So pretty good bounce back deal for the Mets, but again, it is a lot of money there. But even if he does get hurt, then again, you're only still on the hook there for 2 years. And of course, now he joins Matt Scherzer, and the two of them are buddies. You might recall that when Verlander was the pitching for the Detroit Tigers there, a young Scherzer came up with that, and kind of Verlander took him under the wing there. So it's just funny now that the two of them are kind of both old guys now on a different team there. So I don't think the Mets, more or less, I don't think they lose quality there. Against Scherzer, he's not as good as DeGrom there. But again, if you're going to lose DeGrom and replace that with Scherzer, not bad for them. And it is a little good news for the Yankees if you think about it. Just because it seems like, when the Yankees all the time face Houston, you just got Verlander there throwing up zeros. Now, the fact that Verlander is no longer with Houston weakens them a little bit. And, of course, he's just been an absolute Yankee killer, especially in the playoffs. So if the Yankees do happen to face Houston again in 2023 or 2024, it'll be without Justin Verlander. So it's almost a little good news there. Of course, Houston's going to have some awesome pitcher waiting in the wings with the Yankees anyway. But nevertheless, it does help the Yankees a little bit just that now the fact that Verlander is over playing in Citi Field. And you don't have to worry about them anymore. And, and as for DeGrom, he's going to go to Texas, and, the Yankees really doesn't have a difference on him. You face him maybe once down there, maybe comes and has a start up here, but, Texas is far away from being a playoff team, so I don't think the Yankees have to worry about, like, DeGrom shutting them down in a pivotal Game 5, a pivotal Game 7. And another deal, even though it's a little bit old, got a little dust on it, but it's worth mentioning that Jose Abreu signs with those Houston Astros a 3-year deal, and the former White Sox first baseman there, slugger, 36 years old, signed a 3-year deal for $59 million. And yes, it does make Houston a little bit that lineup that's already fierce already a little bit more fiercer. But it does help the Yankees to a degree because supposedly the Boston Red Sox were also in on Abreu. And just the fact that he goes over to Houston, the fact the Yankees now don't have to face Abreu, in the 13 games now that they face each other this year. And of course, half those games will be at Fenway Park, and we all know the Green Monster and stuff like that. So a tough right-handed hitter like Abreu, to not have to face him in Fenway, that's actually good news for the Yankees. Now, could be bad news for the Yankees if the Yankees in Houston, as I mentioned before, end up locking horns again in the playoffs. But that's something you have to worry about until October. At least for the rest of the season, you kind of don't have to worry about Abreu, in a Red Sox uniform. And, you may recall that, when after Rizzo opted out, supposedly Houston was kicking the tires on Rizzo there. So he might have been option number 1 or 2. But nevertheless, once he went back to the Yankees, they kind of swooped in and decided to pick up Abreu there. And, if you want to look about, who's the better of the two, I'd say maybe Abreu's is more fierce and scary at the plate, but I think the Yankees, if you want to compare Rizzo and Abreu, kind of got the better out of the two. Obviously, he's younger at 32 compared to Abreu's 36. Rizzo better defensively, and again, a left-hander at Yankee Stadium and left-hander defensively at first base. There's a bit of a premium there. Not Abreu's a butcher boy at first base there, but overall, I think this is a better deal for the Yankees overall. So it seems like Abreu is kind of maybe Houston's plan B. Probably figured that Rizzo was going to go back to the Yankees anyway. So nevertheless, and for Abreu, it's kind of a shame. He was a MVP a couple of seasons ago, but obviously he kind of got his career in the U.S. started a little bit late. He was a Cuban defector, so kind of similar with the Yankees and El Duque. Even though he had some great years with the White Sox there, he never really had the full career just because he spent so a lot of his early years in Cuba, and then came over here. So it's good. This probably this will be his final big payday because at the end of this contract he'll be like 39, 40, and maybe go another year or two, similar to like Nelson Cruz. But this is probably his last go around in terms of cashing in. And the Philadelphia Phillies, who were knocked out of the World Series by those same very Houston Astros this past October, decided to bolster up their roster a little bit, made a big move, big splash, signing free agent Trey Turner to an 11-year deal worth $300 million. Now, you figure it's a lot of money for a shortstop, but it does seem to be the going rate for shortstops that have power. Just look at the money, obviously, last offseason that Texas gave to Corey Seager, and you look at some of the numbers that are being crunched for Carlos Correa. So not surprising there. 29 years old, again, a shortstop with power. Was with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Actually, he came with Scherzer to the Dodgers last season in a mid-season trade there. But, of course, the Dodgers weren't interested in retaining his services. Now, how that really affects the Yankees is really more to do with Judge. Now, I know most of the rumors were with Judge to San Francisco. I always feel that Dodgers were more of a threat to steal him. And now that the fact that they're not using that money for Trey Turner, which means they could possibly want to use that money for Aaron Judge here. So I think that's the kind of the scary twist with it there. And it's very interesting. Speaking of those Giants, if you actually want to check your Yankee schedule for the home opener, I believe in March, late March there, they actually the home opener, the Yankees will host those San Francisco Giants. So there's a small opportunity, that chance that if Judge does join the Giants, his first game will be at Yankee Stadium. And just wouldn't that be ironic? And since everyone has World Cup fever, I guess it's worth mentioning the World Baseball Classic and Yankee pitcher Nestor Cortes electing to represent Team USA in the tournament there. So Nestor Cortes will be donning the stripes for Team USA there. Obviously, sure, you like to see a guy represent your country like that, and especially the fact that he's Yankee. But of course, you always kind of hold your breath a little bit, just because he's kind of pitching out of season a little bit, and the fact that he had to exit. He had to exit the playoffs against Houston in his final game with a little groin injury there. So, you just don't really like the idea that he's kind of pitching this thing. But nevertheless, maybe don't care about it. Maybe if, a couple of years ago, I'd have been a little bit more furious, and not furious, and just like, don't do it. But nevertheless, he wants to represent the country there. And plus, they're probably going to baby him just like 3 or 4 innings there, and probably use a bunch of guys out of the bullpen there. So not really a big deal there. So, if you're a Yankee fan and maybe, you want to get your Yankee fix a little early this season, you could check out the World Baseball Classic. And as I mentioned in my podcast, again, this is why you got to subscribe. Get this news that Don Mattingly will be joining the Toronto Blue Jays coaching staff next season. Will be a bench coach for the team there. And again, when we last saw Donnie, when we last left off with him, he was with the Miami Marlins, was managing the team, but again, had a mutual agreement with ownership to leave the team after the 2022 season, just because they were kind of rebuilding and it didn't really make sense for him to stay there anymore. Did some good work with them, was the manager of the National League Manager of the Year with them back in 2020. But I guess deciding now, kind of wants to get back into the coaching ring there. So we'll be joining the Toronto Blue Jays staff there. And, has plenty of experience not only with the Marlins, but of course with the Dodgers a number of years, both when Torrey was the manager and then kind of coaching on him. And then, of course, eventually taking the reins himself. And, of course, was with the Yankees back in 2005 when Torrey was the manager of the Yankees, also being a coach with the team. So plenty of experience there. I'm just a little surprised about it, a number of reasons, just because, with his resume, it just seemed weird for him to kind of I think it's almost like a step down for him a little bit just to be a coach. Just the fact that he's been a manager for so many years. Again, won the Manager of the Year award just 2 years ago. Now you see this all the time. Some managers just decide, hey, look, I can't get a job anywhere else, so I'll be a coach elsewhere. So it does happen. It's very common. Guys kind of up and down a little bit, but I just think there's certain managers such as himself, or like you would see like with Buck Showalter, for example. I don't know if I would put Mattingly in Buck Showalter's class, but you would never see Buck Showalter take a coaching job somewhere else. He would either be a manager or nothing. So I kind of feel like I'm surprised Mattingly kind of did that, but nevertheless, you don't know, maybe he just wants the action, or maybe he needs the money, or whatnot. But also dealing with Mattingly, as of course I'm sure you heard by now that of course was possibly eligible again for the Hall of Fame. Now it's with this new contemporary committee. At the beginning of this season, I actually kind of went through that. Basically, it's outside the normal Baseball Writers Association voting. So basically, it's a committee of 16 people, kind of some former players and executives of so what, who can vote in players who are no longer eligible with the normal, kind of went past their 10 years of eligibility with the normal route. So it's an opportunity for some of these players to get a second look and to give them an opportunity to join the Hall of Fame. And unfortunately, Don Manning was on the list there, but unfortunately fell short. You have to get 12 out of the 16 votes to qualify, and Mattingly, unfortunately, only got 8 there. So only half of those people on the committee thought he would be should be a Hall of Famer. But who did make it, of course, Fred McGriff, getting 16 out of 16 there. So unanimous vote there to get in there, and I thought he deserved it. Actually, been championing for Fred McGriff for a long time, even while he was eligible. You just remember, back in the day, he was just one of the most fierce, dominating players for a long time. Just put up, just one of the scary power hitters up there for a while. And for him to not be in the Hall of Fame was kind of weird. I feel like people like him and like Andre Dawson, who were just on the cusp, were just being left out just by a nose, should have been in. Luckily, Dawson already got in by similar circumstances. And now Fred McGriff will join, will be in Cooperstown there. And I remember the previous episode, I kind of did the breakdown with Carlos Beltran. Again, I'm not too sure if Beltran will make it this season, but I think at some point, for the same reason, Beltran just a very good player over a long time. Maybe not a no doubt about a Hall of Famer, but should be in there. So we'll see if Beltran joins him this year or sometime next year. But I guess, of course, it's the spotlight will be on Fred McGriff there. It's the crime dog, as they call him. And not that I say that this is any sort of conspiracy or anything, but on that committee is actually Greg Maddux, the former Atlanta Brave pitcher who was a teammate of Fred McGriff for a couple of years. So it's just kind of interesting that, you get an opportunity to vote your teammate in like that. I think Fred McGriff belongs there, so I don't think it's part of any kind of conspiracy. And plus, again, Fred McGriff got 16 out of 16, so even if, let's say, Maddox didn't vote for him, he was getting in anyway. But it's kind of interesting there. And, of course, left off the list was the usual suspects who never got in the normal way. Of course, Roger Clemens didn't qualify, Barry Bonds didn't qualify, and, of course, Curt Schilling. Those are the big three that people always feel like, whether, obviously Bonds and Clemens is, due to supposed PED use, and, of course, Schilling kind of, some of his numbers don't exactly qualify, but of course, once he left baseball, has been kind of political commentator and kind of ruffled a lot of feathers with some of his comments. So that probably doesn't help his case at all there. So it seems those three are going to be left out. Now McGriff, in his final season of eligibility through the normal route in 2019, did get 69% of the vote. So he was right there, because you may recall you need 75% to get in, so he was just right at the cusp there, but unfortunately ran out of eligibility. So if there was another year or two in, he might have gotten there anyway. But nonetheless, he's in there, and again, I think he deserves it. And as for people who thought Don Mattingly was going to go in, I just thought, look, as much as we all like Don Mattingly, I just don't think he has the numbers to qualify there, and I didn't think there was any chance they would put him in. Again, maybe at some point it happens, but I just seem doubtful just because, and we'll get into that in a moment. Again, just the longevity isn't there, and even though he had like 4 or 5 amazing seasons in the 80s, it's just not enough to get over the hump there, where someone like Fred McGriff, showed a sustained greatness and dominance over a long period of time. And now that Don Mattingly is in a Toronto Blue Jay uniform, kind of makes it a little interesting now, because now you have this little rivalry, as of course, between Garrett Cole and their pitcher Alek Manoah. Remember last season, Manoah threw at Judge there, and kind of Cole thought it was a dirty play there, so he kind of jumped out of the dugout there and kind of started walking towards the field like he was going to confront Manoah there, and of course he didn't come close to the pitcher's mound there, and of course the comments Manoah made afterwards told Cole, hey, if you can do that again, come across the line. Kind of openly challenged him. Well, he was recently on a podcast and asked who's the dirtiest player in baseball, and the name he threw out there was Garrett Cole, and referencing Cole's, obviously allegations of using substances on the ball there. And of course, we've heard that from other players. Even Josh Donaldson a couple of seasons ago accused Cole of that, and he's kind of been, one of the heads of, why now umpires are kind of checking players pitchers once they come off the mound there. So going to be interesting how that goes into next season. Yankees and Blue Jays kind of, put themselves, had a little bit rival there, just kind of competing for the AL East. Again, Boston was never really in the conversation. Tampa was floating around a little bit, but eventually kind of dropped down. It was really Yankees and Toronto, a little neck and neck in there, and eventually Yankees built themselves a lead, almost blew it, but able to finally secure the AL East. But of course, going into 2023, it's going to be Toronto and the Yankees again, probably the two of all the teams involved, are going to be the two kind of rivaling each other. And we'll see if anything happens with Manoah on the mound there, if he plunks a player, whether it's on purpose or not, and if the bench is clear. Is someone going to Aaron Boone going to throw a punch at Don Mattingly? Probably not, but makes for interesting circumstances. And if you want to look at the two players, Mattingly and McGriff, getting back to them, comparing, why would one get in, one get not? Well, just to look at some of these numbers, which is crazy. So if you look at Fred McGriff, as mentioned before, had a 19-year career. But when you get a chance to look at his stats, he had a 16-year dominant, stretch there from 1987 to 2002. So it's almost across 3 decades there. Now a career 284 hitter. Now his last 2 seasons he bounced out a little bit with the Dodgers and came back again with his hometown Tampa Bay Rays there. He didn't really do too well, so that kind of brought that average down a little bit. But here's someone who's usually around, hovering around 300 for most of his career. But again, because those 2 last seasons they kind of brought him down to 284, but still pretty respectable overall. Career-wise, 493 home runs, so just 7 home runs shy of the Magic 500, which usually used to be a shoo-in to get you into the Hall of Fame. And there's never been even a sniff or an allegation at all about Fred McGriff using any sort of substances like that. So it seemed like that's all natural. As well, you combine that in with 2,400 plus hits there. So yeah, not exactly 3,000 hits, but again, almost just about 500 or 600 away from the Magic 3000 as well. But I think being the fact that he's closer to the magical 500 home run mark there really should stand out there. It really shouldn't have gone to this point, but nevertheless did there. And just look at, it's not to say you did that in a couple of years and that's it, a small handful of years. It's a sustained greatness. Again, had a good 16-year dominant run if you want to look. Just look from 1987 to 2002. Just look at those years there. He had 14 seasons of 20 or more home runs, had 8 seasons of 100 or more RBIs, and hit 30 home runs or more with 5 different teams. So it's it's pretty dominating stuff there over a long period of time, where it's not like this is kind of a flash in a bottle type of guy there, or someone who kind of hung on, just to pad up his stats. You could maybe make the argument his last 2 or 3 years there maybe hung on a little bit, maybe just for a couple of extra paychecks. His last year, he hardly played at all, was hurt a lot. Second to last year, at least hit some home runs there, so it wasn't a total waste. But it's not someone just hung on forever like a Harold Baines type just to pad his stats a little bit. I think McGriff kind of went at a good time there, so it was kind of all genuine. What I think does hurt McGriff a little bit, as I mentioned, same with Carlos Beltran, played like 7 different teams. So this is something about a player when you're one player in one uniform for a long period of time. Just from an aesthetic standpoint, I think it helps your case. When you're one of these people that bounce around a lot, you're kind of seen as a mercenary, or just to come, just someone who's looking for money and all that stuff like that. And you can't really settle into one spot. I think it kind of hurts him a little bit in that regard, just for some players. So that could be a part of a reason. But of course, McGriff had a 5-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger, won a world championship with the 1995 Braves. Now, luckily, the 1996 Yankees beat that team, nevertheless. But I'm sure, as you remember, anytime that Fred McGriff came up, it was a scary moment. And he hit the home run. I guess it was the first game. Hit the home run off of Andy Pettitte, a big 3-run home run early on there to give themselves a lead in that game. Of course, they blew out the Yankees in that first game. And of course, later on, they would have to go to Graham Lloyd to get him and Ryan Klesko out. But I'm sure, as a Yankee fan, you remember how scary it was when Fred McGriff was in the batter's box there. And if you want to look for Don Mattingly, unfortunately, if you want to compare the two, he only had a 14-year career. Now, he had an amazing 5 years. If you look from 1984 to 1989, which is stupendous. Had an MVP in '85 there. Again, so if you want to make the case for Don Mattingly, you look at his career batting average, which even though it went down in the past couple of seasons when he was dealing with the back and other issues, still a respectable 307 batting average for his career. Even though he took some hits later on in the season just with the injuries there, but still respectable. But if you look at the power numbers and the hit numbers, only 222 career home runs. That's like half than the 500. And in terms of his total hits, a little over 2,100 there, so just a little over 2,000. I believe Bernie has about the same thing and over that, and you would never even consider Bernie for a Hall of Famer. So just not enough there. Now, I know people want to make the case sometimes with the, I guess you would call it the Cy Young effect, where, all right, someone doesn't have a great career, but if they've had an amazing run like Cy Young did, not Cy Young, Sandy Koufax, the handful of years he was with the Dodgers there, that, would you consider the Sandy Koufax argument for Don Mattingly? You really can't, because if you look at Sandy Koufax, yes, he too had a very short career, but that span he was dominant was way more impressive what Don Mattingly brought to the plate there. Of course, you look at Sandy Koufax, 3-time winning the Cy Young Award, 4-time world champion, 5-time ERA leader there. So that's and of course 1 MVP of his own there. So you look at 3 Cy Youngs and 1 MVP in a short amount of time there. That's more impressive than, yes, Don Mattingly had 5 great seasons from '84 to '89, which included an MVP. But if you look at the package Sandy Koufax had there, it still trumps. It's more impressive what Don Mattingly was able to bring to the table. So that's why you can't really use the Sandy Koufax argument for Don Mattingly. It just came for the fact for Don Mattingly. Unfortunately, just once after '89 to '90, he just wasn't the same player anymore. Always had a respectful batting average there, so it was not like he plummeted to be like a 230 or 240 hitter, but just didn't have the power numbers anymore. Wasn't hitting the home runs and wasn't hitting the doubles, so that's why I wasn't shocked at all that he wasn't voted for the Hall of Fame this time. And unfortunately, I just don't think, even though maybe we'll see what happens, I just don't think he'll ever make it. So Cashman, you got your contract, so show Judge the money.